Recording in progress.
A very good evening to our distinguished guests and to all our spectators joining us today. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the second day of Road to INSL Innovation Nation Sri Lanka 2021. Lanka is a volunteer-led initiative by the IEEE Sri Lanka section with the sole purpose of training, mentor, and financially support aspiring entrepreneurs and inspire innovation and entrepreneurship amongst the Sri Lankan youth. And the Road to INSL is a 4-day training program setting off the entrepreneurial spark in a young person or nurturing the competitiveness inside those who are already dreaming of becoming the basic techniques from finding an investable and innovative idea to implement it. To officially welcome the gathering for the second day of Road to INSL, I would like to invite the program team lead of the IEEE Innovation Nation Sri Lanka 2021, Mr. Savindu Mandara. Mr. Savindu, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ravisha. Okay. Yeah. So, very good evening to all of you, and I hope that you all are staying safe and fine. So, welcome to the Road to INSL Day 2 of the Innovation Nation Sri Lanka 2021. Hope you all joined yesterday's session on opportunities for newbies and what after this INSL by Mr. Dhammika Marasinghe, and found it interesting and useful as well. So today we are going to have another insightful session on how to develop a business model canvas, which is going to be very useful for entrepreneurial journey. So for an organization to innovate, it has to be fine-tuned strategy that gives it towards viable future business model. So using a tool like business model canvas can serve unite your company under a clear visualization of where your organization sits today and where it can be tomorrow. So in this workshop, you will be able to learn about business canvas model from the scratch and critical components inside those. And to enhance your knowledge on this topic, today we have a very special speaker with us, Mr. Aloka Gunasekara, who is a director of startup and business ecosystem innovation and program manager at Startup X Foundry, and who has been part of this Innovation Nation Sri Lanka program in the past years as well. So hope you'll find this session very informative and very useful for your entrepreneurial journey ahead. So thank you, and over to you, Ravisha.
Thank you, Mr. Savindu. Before I invite the speaker onto this virtual stage, I'd like to make a quick announcement to all of the participants present here today. If you get any questions throughout the session, you may use the link in the chat box to drop them in, and you can also use the raise hand option during the Q&A session. At the end of the session, our guest speaker will gladly answer your questions. Also, we will put the attendance sheet to the chat box so that you can mark your attendance as well. With that being said, let me introduce you our guest speaker of the day. He is the Director of Startup and Business Ecosystem Innovation at ULEAD, an IESC project, as well as an entrepreneur who follows his passion for improving entrepreneurial ecosystems in emerging economies. He has worked directly with many entrepreneurs at various stages of their entrepreneurial journey, and he also collaborates with mentors, startup founders, and contributes to creating a conducive startup ecosystem. His consulting work with startups focuses on business modeling, product development, process implementation, process management, growth governance, risk mitigation and collaborative workforce, while he also worked with international and local development agencies on MSME development, entrepreneurship assistance, ecosystem development, and ecosystem vision. He has also worked as the program manager at Startup Next Foundry, a startup accelerator in Colombo, for almost 4 years. So let me welcome Mr. Aloka Gunasekara with a virtual round of applause on the spotlight. Mr. Aloka, the spotlight is all yours to set off the entrepreneurial spark in those who are already dreaming of becoming entrepreneurs.
Sorry. Thanks, Ravisha. Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and guys, thank you very much for inviting me for this session. It's great to be a part of the IEEE Innovation Nation program again, and I look forward to a really nice session. And of course, I would like you guys to ask questions and don't hold back, especially when it comes to questions. If you think that okay, you could be having even a simpler or like a question that you think you've done, don't worry about it, just ask it away. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking questions. That's one of the best ways for you to learn. So with that, let me just go forward with my presentation and the session. Right, so the session that I'm going to do today is how to develop a business model canvas. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard of the business model canvas quite often, and I'm sure that you've seen some aspects of the business model canvas, and you've seen some of these, some people using the business model canvas, so on and so forth. But one thing that you have to understand and know is that the business model canvas is not necessarily something that you should be using on its own. Ideal case, you need to have a good understanding of like what you're trying to do. Now, before coming to a business model canvas with this context, let me just take you through the areas that you should also be cognizant of. Now, so when it comes to business ideas, and this is where things start. When it comes to business ideas, what I would like you to do is understand this Maslow's pyramid of needs as a way to understand business ideas. Now, what is this pyramid of needs? Now, it actually starts from the bottom. So you have this physiological needs. So food, water, warmth, and rest, things that you cannot live without. And then you have safety needs, security, safety, having a house, so on and so forth. Belongingness and love needs. These are essentially intimate relationships, friends, and the network that you have through IEEE Innovation Nation, so on and so forth. That's where you have the belongingness needs covered. You have esteem needs. These are education, sports, politics, and people who go into military. Those things are esteem needs. And then at the pinnacle of this pyramid, you have self-actualization needs. And these are, spiritual services, art, self-improvement, philanthropy, so on and so forth. Now, when you want to understand business ideas, you have to figure out like at which stage you have your business idea at. Now, if you look at this triangle or the pyramid, you see that the bottom two layers are basic needs, things that you cannot live without. And then next on, you have psychological needs. These you need to have a really good life or to live a contented life. And self-fulfillment needs, which is the pinnacle of it, is things that you can have if your safety needs, or the basic needs, and the psychological needs are covered. Now, let me take an example. Let's take a Sri Lankan example, pick me. Now, I'm sure like during the lockdowns, you had so much of issues. And as someone, I know that, okay, a lot of you guys are from all over the country. And during the lockdowns, since we were living in Colombo, Pick Me was more of a lifesaver than anything else. Because when we couldn't go out, we used the Pick Me services for delivering food, delivering all the rations, gas, a lot of these things. So at that point, Pick Me actually became a basic need. Now, when you have a product or service that aligns with that category, basic needs, that means you can actually address a large group of people, and you can also charge a certain amount of a premium for providing that service. And this is important. And in a way that you can understand it, the applications, let me take an example with your mobile phones. The applications which would cover your basic needs would be the apps that you have at a finger, at like a, probably on your splash screen. Like you unlock your phone, and these are the first few apps that you could be having, first few apps that you could be accessing all the time. Now, when it comes to psychological needs, again, let me take the example of the mobile phone. This is where you would have your Instagram, if you are into TikTok, then other applications. Now, in my case, it's LinkedIn. Some people are using Facebook, so on and so forth. So you have the basic needs represented by apps like Pick Me or Uber Eats. And then you have psychological needs represented by apps like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or LinkedIn, so on and so forth. And self-fulfillment needs. And these are the sort of things that you would not have on your app, on your mobile at all. Because most of the applications that you would use for self-actualization, you wouldn't necessarily use them on the mobile phone. You would actually do it on your own. So travel, spiritual services. I know that there are certain apps for spiritual services, but you wouldn't necessarily use these apps that often. So in terms of your usage of the apps, those would be like at the bottom of your usage. So now, why is this important? Now, when you come up with an idea, a business idea, you need to understand at which level your business idea falls into. So if it's, let's say, a mobile application where you could use it for reserving a bus ticket. Now, for some people, that would be a basic need. Now, for example, I know that some of you guys are from, let's say, University of Sabaragamu, and if you're living in, let's say, Kandy, you would like to have the access to booking a bus seat because you'll be traveling to Kandy during the weekend and then going back to university Sunday evening or Monday morning. So having that ability to book a seat is going to be very important for you. So for someone like that, being able to book a bus ticket is a basic need. And psychological needs. So if you can come up with, let's say, a mobile application for IEEE students, now that's going to be covering some needs and that's going to align with psychological needs. So whenever you come up with a product idea or a service idea, you have to figure out at which place or at which level your idea falls into. That actually makes things a little bit easier for you. Now, moving on. So I talked about the theoretical approach. Now let me talk to you about the practical approach. Now, the practical approach of a business idea, you have to validate your idea in 3 ways. So you have to first validate your idea itself, then you have to validate your business itself, and then you have to validate your market. Now, what do I mean by this idea validation, business validation, and market validation? Let me give you a very, very simple method to validate each of these things. Now, when it comes to idea validation, there are 2 things that you can use. I'm sure most of you have heard of the SWOT analysis. PEST analysis, I'm not too sure whether you've heard of this very often. Now, let me go to the question analysis because you always obviously understand what SWOT analysis is. Now, question analysis is this 7 sector analysis about the idea that you have. So you should do analysis about the political situation. Right? Take your idea and then you do a little bit of a political analysis. Okay, whether that's going to be politically problematic or whether that's going to be politically charged, so on and so forth. Then you look at the economic aspect of it. You look at the social aspect of it, technological aspect of it, ecological, education, legal, so on and so forth. You do this analysis just to understand how your idea aligns with the socio-economical context that you are living in. And this also differs according to where you live. Now, for example, if you're someone who's living in Anuradhapura, the sort of problems that you have are going to be completely different from someone who's living in Noida. Because the climate is different, the environment is different, language is also different, so on and so forth. So you do this question analysis and understand how your idea aligns. And how you can do this really well is you do a SWOT analysis. Now, SWOT analysis, I'm sure all of you know, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you do a SWOT analysis for each of these areas that's included in the question analysis. So imagine that you have an idea. Okay, let's take our bus ticket booking idea. So you take that idea and then you align it with the political aspect of it. Okay, what are the political strengths? What are the political weaknesses? What could be the opportunities? What could be the threats? So on and so forth. So you understand the sort of the political angle, and then you understand the sort of the economical angle, social, sort of the social, technological, so on and so forth. Now, do we think that, okay, this is a lot of work to do? Well, it's not. Now, the deal is, now, I've been in this entrepreneurial game for the longest time. And what usually happens is whenever you get an idea, you get excited. And then only you actually delve into a lot more information about, what is this idea and how does this idea work, so on and so forth. Now, what usually happens is the more information you get, because what usually happens is you have an idea, you think that's a good idea to work on, and then you start working on it. What usually happens is the more you start working on it, the more information that you get. And what usually happens is the more information that you get, the harder for you to figure out what to do and how to make decisions, so on and so forth. Now, when you have this sort of framework, so you do a SWOT analysis for the best deal, the easier for you to understand how to get things done properly. Now, moving on. There's also something that you can use called the 4-factor value matrix. So, it's actually introduced by someone called Matt Groupers. And what you can do is you can identify the needs, the barriers, the frequencies, and the scale. So how does this help? So you try to identify what sort of a need your product or the service solves, or what sort of a need your product or the service addresses. And then you identify what are the barriers to get from having this need and addressing it with the product or the service. What are the barriers? Is it the money? Is it not having access to internet? Is it not having access to reliable mobile phones? You try to understand what are the barriers. And then you also identify what's the frequency of people using your product or service. This is really important. Now, for example, let's take our Pick Me example again. Now, Pick Me is used by a cross-section of people in the country. So that includes people who are using the iPhone 12 Pro Max to people who are using the cheapest Android smartphone. So Pick Me needs to be able to address the needs of people from across this spectrum. So when the frequency is higher, the application, I'm taking application as an example, application that you are going to create should be very lightweight so that more people can use it. And if the frequency of the application is not that, you can actually try out using an MVP, a minimum viable product. So you figure out, okay, how frequent people are using it, and then you tweak it to address better product or better features, or you tweak it down so that you can address more people and the scale. So how many people are using it? If, let's say, 10 million people are using the application, ideal case for you would be for you to figure out, okay, how do I address the needs of all these 10 million people? How do I make sure that the app doesn't crash? So you try to make sure that, okay, the app is very lightweight. And also, if more people are using that application in, let's say, in bad internet situations, you definitely have to make sure that the data packets that you exchange from the server is actually quite small. And these are practical things, but these are very, very important product and service features. Now, from that point onwards, let me come to the meat and potatoes, which is the business validation. And in it, I'm going to talk about two different tools. Now, my first tool is the business model canvas, and my second tool is the value proposition canvas. Now, I can explain the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas a little later. But what I would like you to do is, I would like you to have a look at the video from Strategize itself, because it's doing an absolutely amazing service or absolutely amazing job in explaining what the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas is.
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of the business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the business model canvas, a tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. The channels describe through which touchpoints you're interacting with customers and delivering value. The customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. The key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. The key partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. Then once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the business model canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
All right. So the business model canvas. Now, everybody is talking about the business model canvas, but it's not that hard. So I mean, just looking at it, it's a diagram that consists of 9 parts. But essentially, what the business model canvas does is it tells you like what exactly are you providing to your customers, and it tells you how you are going to provide that product or service. And then you get to understand the costs of it and the revenues of it. It's simple as that. So yes, everybody's talking about the business model canvas, but it's not that difficult to understand. There are a few things about it. Now, let me take you through the 9 areas first. And I'm going to take you through the 9 areas in the order that I usually do it. Now, what I usually do is I look at the customer segments first. So imagine that that I am doing, let's say, the bus ticket booking service that I talked about. So if that's the case, who are my customers? Now, the most obvious answer would be the passengers. Yes, absolutely. But at the same time, there are, then the next, second most obvious thing could be, okay, the drivers and the conductors. The third could be like the owners. But there are not so obvious customer segments in that whole business model. Now, those could be, let's say, the inter-district travel commission. So those guys would like to know, okay, how many buses are applying from, let's say, Haputale to Kandy. That information is important because if they have that information, they can actually identify. And if they have an understanding of the demand for that particular route, they can actually identify, okay, whether more buses to be introduced or buses to be reduced, or they can also identify whether people are willing to pay a higher price. And if that's the case, introduce maybe some intercity buses, so on and so forth. So customer segments, it's very important that you actually try to think through the business model to figure out what your customer segments are and be as detailed as possible. So if you think that, for example, in the bus ticket booking service, police could be a customer segment. Now you may ask, okay, how is police a customer segment? Let me come to that. Likewise, you actually go down to that granularity and try to understand, okay, who your customers are. Now, once you identify your customers, you can actually go back to value propositions. So, like I said, this is the order that I would do the business model canvas. So, I first do the customer segments and then I move to value propositions. Now, in value propositions, what I do is for each customer segment, I try to identify as much value propositions as possible, at least one. So in the case of, let's say, the passengers, the value propositions could be not having to wait until the bus comes. You know at what time the bus is going to come. Number 2, you have a reserved seat. You are assured that a seat is going to be available. So if you are, let's say, if you are traveling from Haputale to Kandy, you don't have to worry about not getting a seat. That's really important. And it also gives you an indication of the time, because if you have data, you can actually predict how long a particular bus takes to go from, let's say, Haputale to Kandy. And likewise, you can actually identify different value propositions for different customer segments. So for the driver and the bus conductor, the information that they are getting is important because they have an understanding of what the demand for the route is like. And they know that, okay, like person X is going to get on the bus from, let's say, Haputale, person B is going to get onto the bus from, let's say, Ratnapula, so on and so forth. And what happens is when that information is given to the bus conductor and the driver, their lives become a lot more easier. And of course, they can actually figure out how to plan their route. And of course, they also know that, okay, people are waiting. And then when they go from point A to point B, they know that, okay, yes, we have 3 people to get on. Fine, you take those people, 3 people in, and then you move on, so on and so forth. Now, what are the value propositions for the owner? The owner would know how many people, how many passengers are in the bus, and then he or she can actually figure out what the revenue of the bus is, and the estimated departure time, arrival time, and of course he or she can also track where the bus is, so on and so forth. So how about the interprovincial or interdistrict travel commission? Pretty much the same things. They would know where the bus is going, where the bus is at, and whether they are adhering to the rules and regulations and the road rules, so on and so forth. What happens with the police is the same thing, right? So right now in Sri Lanka, buses happen to be one of the, they're the number one road rules violators. And if the police has an understanding of like which buses are plying on the road, they can actually figure out which buses to monitor, and they can also get an understanding of like who the good drivers are, who the bad drivers are, so on and so forth, and then they can actually do remedial solutions to address any issues that they are facing. So likewise, so what you have to do is you have to identify the customers, and then you go for value propositions, and then you figure out how do you manage the relationship with your customers. Now, in that case, this is where you come to channels. Now, if it's the passengers that we are talking about, the channel would be the application that you have. It's a mobile application, right? And then if you have SMS notifications or SMS confirmations, that too is going to be another channel. And then likewise, you identify how you manage these relationships between your customers and the value propositions, and then those are going to be your channels. And then let's move on top of that. Customer relationships. What are the relationships that you need to have between your customers and the value propositions? Now, customer relationships. Now, in the case of the passenger, it's very, very simple, right? So you have to manage the relationship that you manage with your passenger is informing when the bus is coming, getting paid. If you have an online platform to get paid, or like IPG to get paid, yes, you know that you are already paid. You don't have to worry about it. And even if the passenger gets onto the bus or not, you don't have to worry about it because you're already paid, and you know exactly what your revenue is, so on and so forth. And in the case of, let's say, the driver and the conductor, the value proposition could be, understanding where the passengers are. And if you have ever used this particular bus service called the Superline, you know that, they usually call you before they get to a particular point. They're like, yeah. So this happened to me when I was in Haputale. At Bandara, they actually called me up and said, hey, so we are leaving Bandara. Are you in Haputale? And I said, yes, I'm in Haputale at that point. And they're like, yes, we'll pick you up, be at this place, which I did. And it was very easy for me to do that because I'm not native to Haputale. I'm not from Haputale. But once they told me the landmarks and so on and so forth, I could get to that point and get onto the bus. And I'm talking about I got onto the bus. So this is how you manage the customer segments and the value propositions to the customer relationships. Same applies to, let's say, the owners. Same applies to, let's say, the police. Same applies to, let's say, the inter-provincial or inter-district transmission commission or transport commission. So these are things that you have to figure out. And in the business model canvas, what's right to the value proposition is all about how you manage your customers, the value propositions, and the customer relationships and channels. So that's one segment to it. Now, moving on to the left of the value propositions. Now, so to the right of the value propositions, it's the demand side. To the left of the value propositions, that's the supply side. Now, on the left side, you have the key partners. Now, when you identify your customer segments, your value propositions, your customer relationships and channels, what you have to do is you have to figure out, okay, who are the people who's going to be important or valuable or required for me to provide this product or service. Now, understanding this is really important. This is, again, an area where you can actually miss out on things. Now, key partners. Now, let's take our bus ticket booking example again. Now, in that case, the key partners could be people that you would want to engage to provide that particular service. Now, in the case of the bus ticket booking service, it could be the App Store, because you definitely need to use the App Store to put your app through. And then AWS, because you could be using AWS to host your application. And then people who are developing your software service. If you're using Google Maps, and if you're using Google Maps at a really, really high rate, you might also want to consider using a paid service of Google Maps, so on and so forth. So all these are going to be your key partners. And what happens is, these key partners are the people who allow you to provide this service at a respectable or an accepted service quality level. And then you move on and try to figure out, okay, what are the key activities that you have? So in the bus ticket booking service, the key activities are helping people to book a ticket. Simple as that. And another thing about the business model canvas is, okay, now you don't have to think about the business model canvas as the best thing after sliced bread. No. Okay, this is a very, very simple tool. And you have to approach it like that. Don't approach it as if you are approaching, let's say, an Excel, because it's not like that. There's absolutely nothing wrong in making mistakes here. I made more than enough mistakes. I don't even remember how many mistakes I made. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. You make the mistakes, you figure out, okay, so this doesn't work, and then you move on. That's how things work. That's how entrepreneurship works. So you identify your key activities, and then you identify your key resources. Now, what are the key resources? In our example, it could be people who are developing it. It could be cash to a certain extent, or if you have AWS credit, that can also be a key resource. And time is a key resource, so on and so forth. Then you identify your cost structure. What are the costs? And then you identify your revenue streams. Now, I can explain the business model canvas until this session ends today, but it serves absolutely no purpose if I do that. So let me just take you through an example. Now, this example is an actual example from Startup X Foundry when I was the program manager of it. And when we were setting up Startup X Foundry, we actually did this whole exercise of the business model canvas multiple times. How many times? The one I'm sharing with you is our 13th iteration, but we did more than that. So this is actually from our first year of operations, but from that point onwards, I mean, we did a business model canvas or like multiples of business model canvases pretty much every year. Now, let me take you through this. Now, Startup X Foundry is an incubator. So in it, what we did was we actually incubated a few startups so that we could get to an exit point and earn some money out of it. And that's the motive, right? So we literally wanted to set up some good business and then exit them so that we get some money. Nothing wrong with it. So our customer segments were startups, investors, corporates, startup communities, and technologies. Now, our value propositions for startups, we enable them to build their businesses. We had a physical space. We had access to a lot of resources, including AWS credits, Microsoft credits, and then a lot of access to markets across the globe, Norway, to Australia, to Singapore, to India, to multiples of these markets, and we made it available for all the entrepreneurs who are working with us. For investors, we enabled investors to identify opportunities and make enlightened investments. Now, what do I mean? So the problem with the startups is, if that startup founder is really, really good in pitching, he or she can actually pitch really well and convince people. The best example I can give is Theranos. It's, I think, Elizabeth Holmes was the CEO. She's a really convincing CEO and a pitcher. So she convinced a lot of people, including some really, really influential people. And Theranos went bust because they were literally lying about what they were capable of. So what happens is the investors usually make their decisions on the face value. So what we as Startup Foundry we did was we actually enabled the investors to figure out what are the best investment opportunities are. And we did a lot of due diligence with the startups so that the investors could identify, okay, this is a startup that I should invest in, because not only that I'm going to invest my money in it, but I also have the network that I can actually position. So we did that with the investors. For corporates, we allow the corporates to address their disruptive needs. Now, what does that mean? Now, for example, let's take a large corporate. I'm just taking this as an example. A large corporate like Unilever. Now, Unilever has been in the business for hundreds of years. If I think about 100 years, not too sure how many years, but they've been in business for a long time. And they have set processes that they are following. And you cannot expect to change these processes overnight. But the current needs of the marketplace are changing on a constant basis, on a daily basis. And right now, I'm sure all of you guys are working on this. We are talking about agile development methodologies. We are talking about lean startups. We are talking about minimum viable products, and so many other things. We are talking about venture capitalism. We are talking about failing fast. A lot of these things. Now, all these things, some corporates don't necessarily understand this that way. So this is where we came in, and we allowed them to address the disruptive needs. For example, if Unilever wanted to address, let's say, advertisement technology, they wanted us to target people between the ages of, let's say, 18 to 35 who are not using any sort of shampoo. That's a really good problem to solve with the incubator model that we have. So on and so forth. The startup communities. So as Startup Foundry, we actually allowed quite a lot of startup communities to come and meet. This is before COVID, obviously. I think for the first 3 years, we had more than 100 events at Startup Foundry that was hosted for free. So essentially, we allowed people to get together, talk about startups, talk about how to communicate and connect with people, so on and so forth. And technologies, we gave them opportunities to start their own businesses at a lower capex. What does it mean? So technologists are the people who actually have they know how to build things, and some of them actually have really good ideas. So with Startup Foundry, we actually allowed them to do that, because when they started working as Startup Foundry, they didn't necessarily have to worry about rents or internet or AWS or anything like that, because all of these things we provided. So those are the value propositions. And our customer relationships, the website, the Facebook, regular PR, we usually did 2 press releases each year, one-on-one interactions, organized events, so on and so forth, lots of things. And for channels, we had university reach outs, hackathons, spending time with people, personal relationships, all that. Investors and corporate, usually these are personal relationships. We pitched a lot, and then of course the website. So likewise, these are the things that you would do to get your business up to a certain point. And this is not rocket science. These are like common sense. And all what you do with the business model canvas is you put it into these 9 boxes. That's all you do. Don't worry about the business model canvas too much. Now, there are a few ground rules though. Okay, ideal case, and these are like things that you should do, shouldn't do. Don't write on the canvas. If you take the canvas, like ideal case would be you print it on like a A3 or A2 paper, massive paper, and then don't write on it. Use sticky notes, because what happens is you sometimes figure out that okay, the idea that you wrote down, it could be wrong, or you want to amend it. When that's the case, you just crumple the sticky note, throw it out. You write the next idea, and keep things very, very simple. One idea per sticky note. And to be very honest, where do you start within the business model canvas? It doesn't really matter. I told you that I like to start with the customer segments because that's the easiest thing for me to do. But if you think that okay, revenue and cost items are the things that you should focus on, be my guest, go ahead and do that. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And all the relevant elements. And this is where people go wrong quite a lot, because they tend to lose a few things here and there. My suggestion would be, okay, do the business model canvas once, walk away, come back a day after and look at it again. And then you would realize that, okay, you missed certain things. If that's the case, add them. Check completeness and coherence. Now, what does this mean? Now, if I'm to go back to the business model canvas that we prepared for Startups Only, this actually tells a story. So it tells who the customer segment is, what the value proposition is. Let me do this. So startups, we enable them to build their business. We manage, our relationship with them is managed through the website, Facebook, regular PRs, and so forth. And how we do that is we do university reach outs, existing hackathons, so on and so forth. So you definitely need to be able to tell a story once your business model canvas is done. So you can simplify it even more. You can actually tell a story about the customer segments and value propositions. So the right of the business model canvas, so the right of value propositions, you tell a story in that section, and then you tell a story to the left of the value propositions. How this value proposition is provided by the key partners, the activities, resources, so on and so forth. And then, of course, what's your costs, what's your revenues. And the best practices, color code the sticky notes. Now, what does this mean? So if you have multiple customer segments and multiple value propositions, categorize them according to the color. So if you're using, let's say, a red color sticky note for startups, value propositions for the startup should also be in red. If you're using, let's say, a yellow color sticky note for investors, use the same color for your value propositions. Where possible, use drawings and images. This doesn't have to be like super detailed. Like you can draw stick figures, absolutely all right. So the whole idea is that, okay, you could be the person who's doing the business model canvas, but anyone who's working in should be able to understand what this business model canvas says. That's where the value is. And don't be too granular. And this is another problem. People tend to get a little bit too granular with the business model canvases. Don't do that. Just keep it at a high level. Like, okay, who's your customer? What are you providing? And how do you provide? Keep it like that. Don't go to like the feature level. Don't try to write user stories with a business model canvas. Now, frequent mistakes, often elements. This usually happens. Like you sometimes have some customer segments where you haven't necessarily identified a value propositions. Don't do that. If you have a business, if you have a customer segment that you've identified, always have a value proposition, one or more. Mixing present and future, don't do that. So if you want to stick to something that's happening right now, stick to it. Don't go for the future state of it. I'm sure all of you guys have heard of this. The guy who actually cut down this particular tree. I can't remember the name of the tree. Particular tree, thinking that okay, he's going to sell all the stuff in it, and then he's going to buy a cart or something, and then the tree would actually be a problem for that. And then he cut down the tree without realizing that it's whatever that's in the tree that he's going to sell. So don't do that. And too many ideas in one canvas. Don't do that too. Like you could be having a lot of customer segments, but don't try to, like I said, don't make it too granular. If I'm going back to the sort of bus ticket booking scenario, don't talk about the street vendors who would come to the bus. Don't talk about those guys because it's way too granular and you should not be talking about the street vendors. It's not relevant. So keep the business model canvas in a way that, okay, you can identify what's actually going on. Don't cram it with a lot of information. Right. So moving on. I'm seeing raised hand over. All right. Yes, these are things that you can actually do to design crystal clear business model canvases. And there's many. So let me just go through them quite quickly. There's a level of granularity that you have. Does it correspond with the objectives? Is every building block in your canvas connected to another? So there has to be a connection between all these things that you are going to write. The building blocks has to be very, very precise. You should write it in such a way that okay, you're only talking about one idea and one idea only. If you can allow, for the life of me, I can't draw. So my business model canvases never have like drawings. But if you're good at drawings, do use drawings because it actually helps. And then color coding. Then of course, you also need to identify and distinguish between as is and to be. Like, okay, where you are right now and where you're going to be, so on and so forth. Don't, like I said, don't mix the past, the present and the future. Don't mix them. Then, of course, distinguish between facts and assumptions. So this is really important. I can give you an example where a couple of years back, a startup came to me and they wanted to do this education platform. It's a really, really good idea. And these guys were trying to come up with this particular platform. And I actually got them to interview about 1,200 people. First, they interviewed about 10 people. I didn't like it. I asked them to interview more people. They then went ahead and interviewed about 50 people. I didn't still like it. And then I wanted and out of spite, they just wanted to prove a point. They went ahead and interviewed 1,200 people. Nothing much. It's just a question and then they share. So obviously, this particular product has 3 different parties: the students who are learning, the parents who are paying, and obviously the teachers. Now, the students, the parents, the teachers, everyone said that, okay, look, yes, we would use this platform. It's amazing that you have a platform like this. And the initial approval rates of this whole idea that we were talking about were in the 95s, 97%. And then we funneled the questionnaire down to the payments. And at a certain point, we asked, not from the parents, not from the teachers, but from the parents of the students. There were about 700, close to about 750 of them. We asked them, okay, would you like to pay $5 a month to make use of this service? Now, remember, I told that, okay, the initial approval rates for 95 to 97%. Out of the 750 odd people, only 16 people were willing to pay $5 a month. So the assumption was that, okay, people would use it. And the assumption was, very true, because people would use it. But would they willing to, were they willing to pay for it? No. So the assumption is right, but the fact was not necessarily true. So you have to identify these things with the business model canvases. Now, moving on, I'm going to go to canvas quite quickly. Let me do that now. Okay. Oh.
Every day, companies design products and services to improve their customers' lives. But 72% of new product and service innovations fail to deliver on expectations. This means that customers don't care about 7 out of 10 new products introduced to the market. It doesn't have to be this way. Just like you create value for your business with a business model canvas, there is in fact a tool to intentionally visualize, design, and test how you create value for customers. It's called the Value Proposition Canvas. The Value Proposition Canvas is composed of 2 parts, the customer profile and the value map. With the customer profile, you describe the jobs your customers try to get done. Jobs can be functional, like getting from A to B, social, like impressing friends and colleagues, or emotional, like gaining peace of mind. You highlight your customers' pains, which annoy customers while trying to get a job done. Pains and negative outcomes that customers hope to avoid, like dissatisfactions with existing solutions and challenges, frustrations, risks, or obstacles related to performing a job. And you outline customer gains, which describe how customers measure the success of a job well done. Gains are positive outcomes that customers hope to achieve, like concrete results, benefits, and even aspirations. Use the customer profile to visualize, test, and track your understanding of the people or companies you intend to create value for. It's a map that becomes clearer the more you learn about your customers. The second part of the canvas is the value map. With it, you list the products and services your value proposition builds on. You describe in which way these products, services, and features are pain relievers, how they eliminate, reduce, or minimize pains customers care about, making their life easier. And you outline in which way they are gain creators, how they produce, increase, or maximize outcomes and benefits that your customers expect, desire, or would be surprised by. The value map makes explicit how your products and services relieve pains and create gains. Use it to design, test, and iterate your value proposition until you figure out what resonates with customers. You achieve fit by creating a clear connection between what matters to customers and how your products, services, and features ease pains and create gains. Great value propositions target essential customer jobs, pains, and gains, and do so extremely well. Your customer profile may contain countless jobs, pains, and gains, but your value map highlights which ones you intend to focus on. But don't forget, an outstanding value proposition can still fail if your business model is flawed. Successful companies embed outstanding value propositions in scalable and profitable business models. Use the value proposition canvas to create products and services that customers want. Get started at strategizer.com.
So, essentially, what happens with the value proposition canvas? It's an expansion of the customer segments and the value propositions. Now, with the customer segments, what you have to identify is that, okay, all the customers have a job to do. There is, something that they're supposed to do, and there are some pains and gains aligned with it. Now, for example, let's take Zoom, for example. Now, what happened with Zoom is, before COVID, nobody necessarily cared about Zoom at all. But when COVID happened, when lockdown started, everybody was having a massive problem of how to connect with people, and this is big and small. So even if imagine that you're working with a team, like a small team, you can still get away with, let's say, Google Hangout or Skype or Microsoft Teams, so on and so forth. But imagine that you are a university, you have, let's say, 3,000 students or 300 students. I know that, okay, some of your batches are that large. So how do you manage such a large group or set of people with Google Hangout or like Teams or anything like that? And this way Zoom came in. Zoom was easy to use. And what happened was all these other tools that I mentioned, they had some inherent issues with it. Whereas Zoom, you didn't have to. Like, you could be having any sort of email address and you can still get into Zoom because it's an independent service. So you were not necessarily tied to a Gmail account or Microsoft Outlook 365 account, so on and so forth. So Zoom actually solved the problem really well because it was addressing the customer jobs with the products and services that it provided. And it also addressed the pains that the students or the customers had. So if you compare between, let's say, Google Hangouts to Teams to Zoom, Zoom is far more reliable. Not because that not because it's eating, let's say, less data. No, not really. It's just really good at doing what it's supposed to do. Whereas if you take Microsoft is doing Teams among so many other things. So it has Windows, it has PowerPoint to Word to so many other things, and then Teams. You take Google, for example. So they have Chrome, they have Android, they have so many other things, and then also Google. Whereas Zoom, it's just that, Zoom. Singularly focused on solving a problem, singularly focused on addressing pain points, and singularly focused on getting gains for people. And the moment you have this clarity, it actually becomes a lot more easier for you to figure out what the value propositions you are going to provide and how your customers are going to like or dislike it. And everything else in the business model canvas are going to be secondary at that point. Now, it's very true that, okay, you can have a really good value proposition canvas, but if your business model canvas is not very well thought out, you are going to have a problem. Fair enough. But you definitely have to get the value proposition really well, and then only you have to get your business model aligned really well. So these two things, I highly suggest that you use the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas together. It makes your life that much more easy. It will be a little difficult for you to figure out like what these things are at the beginning, but rest assured that when you do this, let's say 3 or 4 times, you are going to get better at understanding how this thing actually works. Moving on. Now, essentially, the value proposition canvas helps you to fill in the blanks of this sentence. So our bus booking service helps passengers who want to go from Kaputale to Kandy by allowing them to buy a bus ticket online and reserve a ticket. Unlike the current system of waiting for a bus and getting into it. So when you fill the blanks in this sentence, it essentially gives you a storified or sentence of what your value proposition is, how it solves a problem, and how it's different to your competitors. So being able to create this sentence is so important when you do the business model canvas. Now, not much with the business model canvas, the value proposition canvas also has some instructions. Now, what are these? Start with customer jobs and pains and gains. Describe your product and services. So essentially what you have to do is you have to do the circle first and then only move to the square. So outline how you intend to create value, bringing people who have deep customer knowledge, so on and so forth. And what are the frequent mistakes? Now, I will be sharing this presentation with you guys, so don't worry about it. It'll make things a little bit more easier for you. So yes, I'm going a little faster on the instructions. Now, what are the frequent mistakes? Trying to address all the pains and target every pain, that's a mistake. Don't do that. You can't do that. Because you can't be like the all-giving cornucopia when it comes to products and services. There's only so many problems that you can solve. Just focus on solving the main ones. The smaller ones, sometimes you can't help it, right? That's all right. When it comes to products and services, you definitely have to think about, okay, what's the biggest utility that you are going to get as an entrepreneur? If you're doing more than the utility that you are getting out of it, don't do it. It doesn't make any sense. Another frequent mistake, mixing present and future. Like, okay, you try to understand what's happening right now, and then you address that as a let's say, there's this pain, and then you have a pain reliever. The pain is in the present, but your pain reliever is in the future. So that doesn't work like that. So if you identify a pain, you have to figure out, okay, how you are addressing that pain with the pain reliever right now. You definitely have to use one map per value proposition. So if you have one customer segment and then you have one value proposition, use a single value proposition canvas, and then don't create fantasy values. I mean, if you, this can especially happen with things like coins, what do you call it? Cryptocurrencies, yeah. So what happens is most people buy cryptocurrencies thinking that, okay, it's going to increase, and then you have things like the rug pulls and so on and so forth, because people tend to create a lot of fantasy values about some of these things. Don't do that. Be very, very realistic when it comes to value propositions. And with that, I am going to move on to some popular business models that you can actually consider. Now, why I'm doing this is, I mean, yes, I can talk about the business models and the value proposition, business model canvas and the value proposition canvas, but if I don't talk about what popular business models are, I think you are going to miss out on a few. So I have 16 different popular business models. Now I'm not going to go through this list, but I'm going to explain what these are. So the first one, retail model. You know this. Every time you go to the Handi Kade, that's a retail model. So essentially they buy things in bulk, sell it to you at 1 unit or 2 units, and then they get a small margin out of it. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's a model that works for the longest time. Production and retail model. So if you take Litrogas, it's a sort of a production and retail model. Or if you take, let's say, Apple, it's a very, very good production and retail model. So in the case of Apple, their margins are about 3x of the cost. So it's a really, really good production and retail model. Platforms. I'm sure you guys know of the platforms. So if you take the Apple App Store, Booking.com, or for that matter, even TickMe or Uber, all these are platforms. So what happens is, it's a two-sided market. You have sellers and buyers at the same time coming together and trying to make a deal out of it. Then global hyperlocal two-sided markets. Now, this is a mouthful, but don't worry about it. I am talking about things like AliExpress, eBay, and Amazon. And then you have the freemiums. Personally, I don't like freemiums that much because you have to sell twice. First, you have to sell once to get people to use whatever the product or service that you provide for free, and then you have to sell it again so that these people would actually start paying you. With models like Atlassian, Jira, and Confluence, this model works, but those are like very rare cases. Most freemium models don't work that well. So if you are thinking of a freemium model, approach that very, very carefully. Then you have versioning. So you have different types of versions. Dialog TV is a good example. So you have one version or one package at $7.99, and then if you need a better channel or like more channels, you have to pay extra for that, so on and so forth. So you have different versions at different price points. Then you have subscriptions. If you are using Netflix, there you go. That's subscription. Or if you have Spotify or you're using Apple Music, any of those services, you have a subscription model that you're using. And advertising. So what happens with advertising, this is very true with a lot of the online magazines that we use, let's say, Daily Mirror or Economist or Wall Street Journal, so on and so forth. So essentially, the platform creates the content, and then me or you as a subscriber goes and reads these things. And there's another party who actually comes in and pays a fee to show an advertisement. Social media is another business model. You have all these influencers, and these are essentially guys who are making use of social media to earn a buck out of it. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. Affiliate models. So MKBHD is a good, actually MKBHD is not a good affiliate. If you take, I don't know whether you guys are watching something called Beijing with Bebish. It's a cooking channel where a guy makes like really, really nice dishes, and you can buy everything that he's making on the channel through Amazon. So it's an affiliate model where when you click to buy something and when you actually buy it, he gets a small percentage of that sale. Auctions, you know what auction is. So all these are like different business models. Data models, Facebook, Google, and a lot of these companies like that, they actually make money out of you selling the data about you. So there's absolutely nothing free about it. Then you have the merchant models. So a merchant is essentially someone who actually buys a large quantity of stuff across the globe and then sells it to other people. So this is, I mean, the best example I can give you for sort of a merchant model is all the shipping companies. I mean, they are going from, let's say, one harbor to the other, and they are exchanging all this stuff. And they're actually earning a lot of money out of it. It's not necessarily like a true form merchant model, but what they do is they exchange goods from point A to point B to point C, and then they actually get a commission out of that for carrying that whatever the goods and the goods from point to point B to point C. Support lines. So what happens is, okay, so if you are using most of the, like, I'm sure you guys have seen all these janitorial services. Most universities have janitorial services right now. All these janitorial services are a support line of a complementary model. So you don't hire people directly, but you get someone else to do it for you. So then you have brokerage models, professional services, so on and so forth. Brokerage models, it's essentially someone who helps me to buy something, and then he or she actually earns a broker's commission out of it. Professional services are people who actually provide professional services. Business model is where people provide professional service to others, like legal services, financial advice, accounting, so on and so forth. And I do have some essential readings that I would like you guys to go through, because that would actually help a little bit for you to understand how these things come together. So yeah, with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. And if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Aloka. And yes, now we can move on to the Q&A session. You can use the raise hand option to direct your questions as well. So moving on, there's a question asking, how would we best form the relationships with the government to utilize the relevant resources? How should we approach?
Approaching the government to can you repeat the question again?
How would we best form the relationships with the government to utilize the relevant resources?
Right. Okay. So that's actually a good question, and there's no straight answer for that. Now, staying with the context of IEEE, I think the most relevant government organization for you guys would be ICTA. So, in terms of the resources, ICTA can actually help you to figure out, okay, what are the products and services available to startup founders. They have done a lot in this sense. I'll tell you some of the examples. There's something called Startup SL, startupsl.lk if I'm not mistaken. So if you register your startup in Startup SL, you can actually apply for government procurement notices, providing that information about the products or services that you provide. And now, let me tell you why this is important. If you want to apply for a government procurement notice, you need to have a few things. One, your registration, company business registration has to be at least 3 years old. You need to have audited accounts. And then you need to have, you need to be able to give out reference. Now, if you're a startup, only 3 months old, how do you do this? It's not possible. So what Startup SL has done is it has actually addressed some of these things in a way that it makes sense. Now, there are multiple ways that the government can help. So, for example, if you take tourism, like most of the lands which are really suitable for tourism purposes is owned by the government. And the government can actually help to release some of these lands for private owners so that they can actually come up with some really good tourism-related activities. And likewise, there are so many things. But it's not a very straightforward answer to give. Depends on the situation. Okay.
Thank you, sir, for your answer. The next question is that how can build up your business in very short period, and if we lost in a business, that what kind of matters have to consider and how can we recover from that?
Okay. So my first suggestion is don't register your company first. Do not register your company. You register your company as the last thing. Now, why is this important? Now, Sri Lanka, I mean, despite however that we've tried to make things easier, doing business in Sri Lanka is actually difficult. So if you register your company, what happens is you are now liable to do a lot of the regulatory activities. For example, whether your business is functioning or not, at the end of 18 months since the inception of your business, you have to submit audited accounts to the Registrar of Companies and Indian Revenue. So and these are not easy things. And then you have to get when you register the company, you have to get something called the TIN certificate, that is tax identification number, and like it's not easy, and you definitely have to go through this process to identify how difficult these things can be. For example, even if you want to open a bank account or get a credit card for the business, you have to have a company resolution. That is, you have to convene an AGM with all the directors. Your secretary has to be there, and then you have to talk about all these things that you want to do, and then you have to do a minute, and you take that minute back to the bank and say, guys, we talked about this. We need a bank account from your bank. We need a credit card from your bank, and please give it to us. And then they'll go through all that, all sorts of forms. It'll go through the director's KYCs. Don't register your company first. Do it as a last thing. If you have a product or the service, first of all, go and figure out like who your ideal customer is. Talk to people. Identify whether they're willing to pay a certain amount of money for it. And these are tough questions to ask. Believe me on this, because it was very hard for me to ask this money question from when I was having my own startup. But once I started asking it, things became a little bit noisier. Am I still uneasy about asking those questions? I am still, after so many years. But start asking these questions. Like, okay, I have this product or service. Are you willing to use it? Most people would say, yes, I'm willing to use it, just because that they don't like to disappoint you and say no. And then follow up that question is, okay, if I have this product or service tomorrow, are you willing to use it? Most often than not, they will say, yeah, if you have it, I will use it. And then the third question is, okay, I'm going to charge you 1,000 rupees for this product or service. Here's a letter of intent. Like, if I have this product by, in 3 months, you say that, okay, you are going to buy it from me. This is when things get very, very difficult. They'll be like, okay, so usual answers are like, these are things that happen. මාස 3කින් පස්සේ මේක වෙයිද දන්නේ නැහැ. ප්‍රොඩක්ට් එක හැදුවෙන් පස්සේ වෙන කතා කරන්න. රුපියල් 1000ක් මේකට වැඩි නේද? All these things are things that I've heard. So you have to be very, very careful about this. So yeah, summing up, don't register a company. Go to your market, figure out whether people are willing to pay for it, and then build the product. MVP is the way forward. Yeah.
Thank you for your answer. There's a question asking, are there any other professional models to present our business idea other than business canvas model?
Okay. Then there's something called the lean canvas. Business model canvas and lean canvas are like very, very similar. My side, I prefer to use business model canvas because it's so versatile, and there's a follow-up with the value proposition canvas. Lean canvas, not necessarily. And also there's one thing that you have to remember. Do business model canvases for your own purposes, but don't take a business model canvas and go to a bank and try to apply for a loan. It won't work. Banks need 30, 40 page proposals. That's how they understand businesses. But when it comes to reality, the moment you write a 30, 40 page proposal, it's obsolete because you actually took the time to write it. And then it probably took you about 3 months. You know what? It doesn't work. Best example I can give you is what happened with COVID. December 2019, we were talking about COVID as okay, the Chinese are having it. Fast forward to April, we were in lockdown. You couldn't have predicted that. So use the business model canvas for your own purposes. Do business proposals for banking purposes. Yeah. Okay.
Your answer. There's another question. If funding is a massive problem, how to achieve that problem to complete the project then?
Funding is a massive problem. What's the second one?
How to achieve that problem to complete the project then?
Right. Okay. the deal about funding is, yes, funding is necessary, but the realities of our context, in Sri Lankan context, is very different to, let's say, a place like Silicon Valley. Now, Silicon Valley, capital is very, very cheap. Like, you can walk into any sort of VC in Silicon Valley, and if you have like a really good idea, they'll easily invest, $200,000, $300 at a drop of a hat, because they don't mind spending that kind of money. But when it comes to Sri Lanka, situation is completely different, right? So raising money, the problem with raising money is that it takes a lot of time. Usually it takes about 3 to 6 months to raise money. And if you are a founder of an early stage startup, this 3 to 6 months is the time that you usually spend on developing your product. And when you are trying to raise money and develop the product, a lot of things happening at the same time, you definitely will lose focus. And that's one of the biggest problems. Number two, in certain instances, fundraising is a little overrated. There are so many things that you can do without raising funds. For example, customer validation. You don't have to raise funds for that, right? Product validation, product market fit. You don't have to raise funds for that. And also understand like why you need funding. If you need funding for an office, don't do that. Like, there's no point. You don't need an office. You can work in a very small place with a couple of your friends, and then you can get things moving to see whether it works or not. The moment you raise funds, you are actually liable to another person, so that, okay, you have to provide a return on the investment. If you can't, you are going to have a massive problem with it. So don't think about raising funds as a first thing. No. Do the product market fit, validations, customer identification. There are so many things that you have to do. And if you're sure that you can raise funds or you need funds to move to the next level, come to a place like the Lankan Angel Network. It's a angel funding. It's a 100 million rupee angel fund, and the usual ticket size is about 5 million rupees. If you have a good idea, more than happy to consider. Right.
Thank you, sir, for your answer. The next question is business model canvas or lean canvas model. What is the most suitable for early stage business? Okay, so again, no right or wrong answer. I prefer the business model canvas just because that there's the value proposition canvas is attached to it. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Then the next question is, what do you do if you don't know how to make the product yet? How do you know the key partners or key activities, so on? Okay. So if you have a business idea but you don't know how to make a product, that means your technical skills are lacking. Find a CTO or find a technical co-founder. And look, one of the biggest problems that I see, especially in Sri Lanka when it comes to startups, is most of the founders are coming from the same background. So it's usually like a couple of few people from engineering background or few people from, let's say, physical sciences background, so on and so forth. There's nothing wrong with it because that's what your peers, that's where your peers are. But ideal case would be for you to seek out people with different specializations. So if you're a physical science student, reach out to an engineering student. Maybe if you do, let's say, a degree in chemistry, find someone who's doing a computer science degree, and find someone from, let's say, the arts faculty who's doing a degree in English or degree in psychology, so on and so forth. When you do that, what happens is your team composition actually improves, and you get this amazing worldview about multiple different things that you didn't know before. It helps. If I'm an investor, I'd love to talk to and work with a team like that because they have a diverse background. So if you don't know how to do a product, first of all, learn how to do it.
if you don't have the capacity to do that, it happens. Find a technical founder to do that for you.
Thank you, sir, for your answer. So moving on with the next question. If we have completed a prototype and the idea that can directly affect the economy regarding energy, whom have I need to pitch the projects to?
Energy and what?
Economy regarding energy. If
Okay.
completed a prototype and the idea that can directly affect the economy regarding energy, whom have I need to pitch the project?
Okay. That's pretty interesting. My suggestion would be, okay, first of all, figure out whether it's patentable, whether that idea is patentable. But chances are that, okay, you might not necessarily have the capacity to understand whether it is. I don't know whether IEEE here has a program to help people like that. If someone can, maybe Dhammika, if you can give some idea whether it's possible, do let the audience know. My suggestion would be to talk to the UBLC of your university. That's University Business Link itself. They have they actually have the resources, the funding, and of course, IP related knowledge, IP, intellectual property related knowledge to do these things. Maybe talk to UBLC. Or if you want to seek out like a completely independent party, maybe speak to the new Inventors Commission. Those guys can also help. But make sure that, okay, if it's patentable, be a bit careful too. Because if it can be patented, there's a lot of value in it. Okay.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, what are the things to consider when providing our service through an online platform?
What are the things to consider? Okay. First of all, reliability. I mean, reliability in the sense, is the platform reliable? Two, okay, are they paying on time? So on and so forth. These things you need to be very, very careful about. And if it's an online platform, you definitely have to be very careful about how they make the payments. Because there have been so many platforms out there, and they said that, okay, they are supporting certain payment methods that's available in Sri Lanka, and a few months down the line, they're like, okay, we are not going to support this. So you can have issues like this. So you have to be very, very careful in that. So reliability of the platform, reliability of the payments, and of course, reliability of the people that you are working with, and the sort of support that they can provide with the certifications, with the help if you have issue with the client, so on and so forth.
Thank you, sir. There's a question asking, even though there are great startup ideas and implementations in Sri Lanka, I personally see there is a problem with marketing the product. What I would like to have about your perspective?
Yeah, so very true. Very true. So that's one of the biggest issues that we are having, to the level that I actually seek out and hire insurance agents and pharmaceutical reps for startups, because those guys know how to sell, and it's very, very difficult to find people who are capable of selling. And I don't mind, working with someone who don't have any sort of technical knowledge, but who can sell, because I can actually give them the knowledge about what the product is, how it works, so on and so forth. But it's very hard for me to, get someone with technical knowledge to go out and sell. It's difficult. So that's what I do. Like insurance agents and pharmaceutical reps, they are known to be like really good salespeople. I just use those guys whenever I have a requirement for marketing and sales.
Okay, so the last question is, if your startup is more towards work as a consultancy and innovative strategies, does it have a business model?
Can you repeat the question?
If your startup is more towards work as a consultancy and innovative strategies, does it have a business model?
It does have a business model. Only thing is you have to figure out how to get paid. That's the hard part. Because you see, you can talk about all these ideas until cows come home, but if there's no one willing to pay for that, then you have a bit of a problem. And that's where things are a little tricky also. My suggestion would be, if you have some sort of a business like that, maybe go out and talk about what you're capable of or what you think of a certain scenario for free. So if you do have like a consultancy of that nature, look at some of the current issues. For example, talk about how you can improve the vaccination process right now in Sri Lanka. And then you talk about it from a commercial perspective. Talk about how values can be created for different stakeholders. And then, take this as a case study and work or present it to someone who could be having those requirements. The biggest challenge for a business like that would be to find clients. If you can find clients and if you can get paid for the service that you are providing, I think you're golden. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aloka, for your inspiring words and for everything you brought to the table. It's indeed our pleasure to have you this evening. And once again, thank you so much for sparing your valuable time, sharing your ideas with all of us here today. I'm pretty sure everyone had an interesting and insightful session. We have prepared a small token of appreciation for you, sir. We hope you accept it.
Thank you very much.
And now we would like to take a snapshot with all our amazing participants to memorize this evening. I would like to request everyone present today to please switch on your cameras to pose for a photo.
Yes, everyone, I can see 175. So please turn on your cameras. Okay. Again, I can see about 40 to 50. Others, come on. Yeah, now I can see 2 pages. All right, ready to go. Okay, then count on 3 to 1. Okay. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Smile. Just hold on a second. Okay, done. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Ravisha.
Everyone, as in any event, there are always those that require thanks and recognition for everything they did for making this event a success. I invite the Secretary of IEEE Innovation Nation Sri Lanka 2021, Ms. Nuwanti Abegunawardena, to address the gathering.
Thank you, Ravisha. Good evening to all of you. It's my privilege to propose the word of thanks on behalf of IEEE Innovation Nation Sri Lanka 2021. Our esteemed guest for the day, Mr. Aloka Gunasekara, the Director of Startup and Business Ecosystem Innovation at ULEAD and IESP project. So we are very much grateful to you for sharing your knowledge on how to develop a business canvas model. We believe that our audience learned a lot from your session. Mr. Dhammika Marasinghe, Chairperson of Student Activities Committee, IEEE Sri Lanka Section, Ms. Lihini Rajapaksha, Sectional Student Representative. Thank you very much, both of you, for your constant support and guidance, and also for being present here with us today, despite your busy schedules. So to all the team leads and members, thank you very much for joining with us today. And last but not least, the day 2 of the Road to INSL program would not be successful without the support of our organizing committee. We are very much thankful to you. So once again, we all would like to extend our sincere gratitude to each and every one of you. Thank you. Over to you, Ravisha.
Thank you, Ms. Nuanti. With that, it brings today's workshop to an end. Thank you and best of luck to everyone who will be competing in INSL 2021. And a special note of thanks to Mr. Aloka Gunasekara for joining with us today. And thank you to all the members of INSL 2021 for making this event happen. I bid you all good night and stay safe.